Hello and welcome back to State of Games, our first event in the GamesIndustry.biz live series of shows. If you miss any of these talks that we're doing at the moment, don't worry, they will be available to rewatch on YouTube straight after they're finished. So just go back and watch any that you've missed. Our next talk is with the Ipsos Mori team who run the GameTrack survey. They do cover the whole of Europe, but actually they're going to specifically look at the UK market and how player behaviour changed during the lockdown. So over to them.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Fionn. I'm from Ipsos Mori. I'm here today to talk about some results that we have from a research programme that we've been running with ISFI for the past 9 years across the main EU countries. So today I'm going to be focusing on the evolution of gaming in the UK, and particularly within the past couple of months while we've been living with COVID-19. So to begin with then, a bit of an explanation about what GameTrack is. So we developed GameTrack on behalf of ISFI, as I said, about 9 years ago. During this time, we've also worked closely with GamesIndustry.biz in order to bring insights from GameTrack to understand the video game market and help the overall sector to understand players and develop opportunities in the UK. So as part of GameTrack, we complete about 80,000 interviews per year, and we assess the gaming market in terms of the people who engage with gaming and the engagement generated within the medium, so time spent or dedicated to gaming time. And at the heart of this ecosystem, obviously games itself, and the acquisition in terms of volume and value level. So we track games acquisition across all game formats that flow through all gaming devices, these being packaged, so that being new packaged and second-hand games, apps, so free app games, paid app games, and the revenue generated within apps. And also online as well, which covers a range of different formats, that being full game downloads, browser games, on-demand streaming gaming, and also multiplayer online games too. So as part of this, we estimate the market and we also integrate the data too. So to begin with what I'm covering today then, what is the current status of gaming in the UK? So the expansion and evolution of the gaming industry in the UK is evident and has been really positive over the past 8 years. Back in 2012, less than half used to play video games on any device, and this has steadily increased to reach around 54% of the overall 6 to 64 population across the country during Q1 2020. Over this time, we've seen how the video game industry has evolved with innovative and engaging games that have contributed to the fact that most of us, or at least most of us 6 to 64, have played games on any device within the last year. And the UK at the moment is the second highest incidence of gaming, just behind France, but the one that has accelerated the furthest since GameTrack started. And playing video games is stronger in the UK than ever. Currently, there are 26 million players in the UK, up 4.5 million versus 2012. And this is a diverse group of people. So the gain of 4.5 million players has been amongst both men and women during this time, and is really driven by players 15 and over. The profile of players is different from the stereotypical image of gamers as spotty teenagers playing a console in their attic. By gender, this group is still slightly biased towards men at 54% of the player base, but this is in line with other EU countries, other than France, which in contrast is the opposite, so 51% female. And then in terms of age profile, there are gamers of all ages. Around a quarter of players are actually 45 to 64-year-olds in the UK, around the same amount of players that we have that are aged 15 to 24. Of course, the incidence of gamers in these age groups is different. So only 36% of 45 to 64s game, while 72% of 15 to 24s do. And then if we look at the youngest players, so 6 to 14, these make up 1 in 5 players, but the incidence amongst them is really high, so between 73 to 88%. So the new profile of players is most of us, and certainly more mature as video games have expanded through devices, are way easier to pick up and access, and we can just access this content all around us. So if we look then at the devices that people are gaming. So video games are quite a broad medium. They're continuously expanding through devices. In the UK, consoles have traditionally dominated the market, reaching around 17 million players, and that is a third of the UK population on any, and this is on any of these devices. Consoles are still increasing their reach via their current generation, with now 4.6 million players on any of the current generation consoles, PS4, Xbox One, or Switch. But it is smart devices that have seen the biggest growth in terms of reach, with 5.1 million more players in 2012 than in 2012. Around 16 million players now play on these devices, more than a third of the overall 6 to 64 population. And that now takes smart devices ahead of PC gaming, which happened in Q1 2019, with around 13 million players on this device. This number is fairly stable, but slowly PC gaming is losing some traction with players' appeal. But we're not all about kind of people and devices, we're also looking at engagement. So players in the UK spend on average 13.4 hours per week playing video games across devices, and it is the most engaged video gaming audience across the EU countries. German, French, Spanish players play for around 9 hours a week, and Italy are around 8 hours per week. So console players play video games on these devices for nearly 10 hours per week. And at an overall level, console gaming time has risen steadily from about 7 hours per week back in Q2 2012. Smart engagement with other devices are a bit shorter. So smart devices players spend on average 6.7 hours per week. And then PC gamers are on about 5.3 hours per week. So what does this mean for revenue then? So during 2019, sales of video games across all formats, that's physical, digital, online apps, is estimated to be worth 3.6 billion pounds. And this puts the video game industry ahead of cinema and physical and digital music sales. The level of UK revenue has more than doubled over the past 7 years. So it was 1.7 billion back in 2012 to 3.6 billion last year. And this is driven by a growing audience and further engagement, but also great games have launched to fulfill gaming needs and further engagement from players within the medium. So the largest growth was seen in 2017 and in 2018. In 2019, the same growth wasn't matched, but that was somewhat to be expected with the launch of the next console generations being announced and to be launched at the end of this year, and players slightly more hesitant to invest in new games last year because of this. But despite this, the overall video game market in the UK delivered a stable 3.6 billion. And actually what's really interesting about this as well is that it's been solely driven by women players who generated an increase in revenue of 13% year on year. So in terms of revenue composition then by game formats, online formats drove most of 2019's revenue at 41%, followed by apps contributing to nearly as much revenue at 39%, and then package still accounting for a fifth, which is nearly 0.7 billion, which includes both new and second-hand packages. So given this background then, where are we in 2020? So as we all know, the start of 2020 saw a spread of COVID-19 across the world, and many countries, including many of those that were running on GameTrack, began to see extreme measures put in place to prevent the spread of the virus. And what that meant was a drastic change in people's media habits. We've seen here at Ipsos changes in daily routines, changes in uptake of different digital platforms, changes in the way that we're viewing TV. And with GameTrack, we also saw the impact on gaming behaviours too. Our Q1 fieldwork, March and April coincided with the national lockdown, and here we started to see the differences in gaming behaviours. But what I'm going to take us through now is a bit more of the Q2 data that we have, which is 2 months solely in lockdown. So I'll just take us through some of this data now, and to help us understand kind of behaviour, opinion changes amongst players during these times, and whether we can see if these changes would be permanent or a shift back to pre-COVID levels. So during the lockdown, engagement with video games increased and hit record levels. Further solidifying the UK as the most engaged EU market. Back in Q1 2012, video games players in the UK used to play games for around 10.7 hours per week. And this has progressively increased for up to 11.6 hours per week at the end of last year. A full extra hour, that is, of video games was added in 8 years. But now, since lockdown, what we've seen is an acceleration of this growth. So in Q1 2020, we saw an increase of 0.9 hours per week, up to 12.5 hours per week spent in the UK playing video games. And then in Q2, we saw a continuation of this growth. And on average, UK gamers were playing 13.4 hours per week. So really, this has been contributed by a range of different devices. So console has contributed the most, with an increase of over 2 hours from Q4 2019. And then PC gaming has also increased slightly less for half an hour, and smart devices increased from 6.3 to 6.7 hours per week during this time. So really, we've seen these increases across all devices, all types of devices. And lockdown has encouraged players to expand their experience across a range of devices too. So more than 3 in 10 players started to play games on other gaming devices in the UK within the last quarter, with consoles and app gaming devices rising in popularity. Particular devices lead this rise. With the console market, 6% of players stated that they started to play video games on PS4, 4% on Nintendo Switch, and 3% on Xbox One within the last month. And even at the last stages of the console generation, there are still possibilities to expand the uptake of these devices within the player population. And with lockdown, players are also playing more and watching more video game content. We ask players which activities they claim they're doing more, same or less during the lockdown period in the UK. And around 40% say that they are playing more video games. This is any types of video games. 27% said that they were playing more video games online. And also what we see is that around 23% state that they are watching more gaming video content. So that's either streams and or esports. So really what we're seeing is that players are playing for longer, they're playing more, and they're embracing additional gaming content consumption. And during this time, we also asked players which gameplay modes they have played in and which one they preferred. So what we see is that single player games are the most played and the most preferred. But what's interesting here is that during the time, we have seen an increase in preference for multiplayer online games. And now nearly 3 in 10 prefer a multiplayer online game. And this can be explained, I think, in a number of ways, that we will go into now. So particularly during lockdown, players in general have used the medium to embrace social connectivity with their friends, to feel happier. It also supports players to feel less isolated and less anxious during these times. But what we see is that these actually vary considerably by type of gameplay played. So if we look at multiplayer online, we see that players who have played this format have a stronger agreement with these statements. So with more than half to nearly 3/4 agreeing with any of these statements. And this can be explained quite clearly with the situation that lockdown has caused for many gamers, with them not being able to go outside and have physical interaction. Those restrictions have led them to do more online interaction via games and meet their friends via games. And through doing this, a multiplayer online game has given players an outlet to be able to still socialize during this time. And this has been particularly embraced by particular types of games. For example, Fortnite, you're able to log on, have a virtual platform to share experiences such as concerts, watching movies, or just providing a virtual space where people can chat within the game. And since this has actually expanded to other games, such as Animal Crossing, where players have been able to start using virtual conference rooms or meetings. And in addition to playing a supportive role to players during this time, parents have also been able to use gaming to spend time with their children and provide a form of education while kids have been off school. So around 3 in 10 parents who play games stated that they are playing video games with their children more during lockdown. And this proportion is higher amongst parents of kids aged 6 to 10, who particularly like to share time playing with their children. So what has this all meant for perceptions of gaming during these times? So all of these experiences with gaming during lockdown have gone some way in improving perceptions of gaming and mental health. So we asked the general public how their perceptions of gaming and mental health have changed during and after the national lockdown. And what we saw was 1 in 4 people in the UK actually improved their perception of video games and mental health during this time. Perhaps obviously this is driven by gamers themselves, and with a third of them having more favourable perceptions of video games and mental health after lockdown. And if we look at the types of games that people are playing and how these perceptions change by that, we see that improved perceptions are even higher amongst multiplayer online players. So 41% of those feel that feel a more positive perception towards video gaming and mental health. And this is really linked to what we were just talking about the benefits that gaming is having on people's anxiety and their ability to socialize. And interestingly, if we actually look at parents as well, parents are really driving the more positive perception. Parents are more likely to have a favourable perception of gaming and mental health than non-parents. So how is this impacting players' investment in games in Q1 2020? So versus last year, less players are purchasing packaged games, but the format still accounts for quite a bit of gaming revenue in Q1 2020. But within our survey, we also asked if people had paid to acquire games within the last 3 months. And in 2020, we have seen a drop in the acquisition of packaged games, while online has increased at the same time and closed the gap, but also improved the overall level of players paying to acquire video games during this time. So of the almost 10 million players that are acquiring video games and extras in the past 3 months, 7.8 million of those are acquiring online. But what is the makeup of those that are buying different types of games? So packaged acquisitions are actually preferred by younger gamers. So you can see here that amongst 15 to 24-year-olds, 43% have paid to acquire a packaged game. That is the highest of any other type of game versus app and versus online. And then actually, if we look at the older groups, if we look at 25 to 34, then online is the most preferred type of game to have acquired during this time, 24% versus 17% of packaged. So to conclude then, to wrap us up, how has the gaming market changed over the pandemic? So I'm just going to take us through 4 key points that we can take with us and think about beyond this. So overall, the UK video game market continues to evolve with lockdown, driving engagement and driving digital growth. To begin with, video game engagement has reached record levels during the national lockdown in the UK, and on average, each player plays for longer than ever before, reaching 13.4 hours a week during Q2 2020. This engagement is likely to drive increased revenue for the period. Secondly, lockdown encouraged gaming across multiple devices. Gaming, multiplayer online in particular, have helped with mental health and played a supportive role in lockdown. Parents have also found value in gaming with their children and to help them facilitate learning while schools have been closed. Thirdly, despite quite a balanced player gender profile, as we saw earlier in this presentation, paid acquisition of games is still driven by males, and there is further potential to engage women into gaming, to play and engage in the medium. And then lastly, 1 in 5 players have acquired video games in the past 3 months, which equates to almost 10 million players. Package is more likely to be acquired by younger players, whilst digital video game paid formats appeal more to those aged 25 to 34. That's it from us today. Thank you, and do get in touch if you have any questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much to the Ipsos Mori team and everyone who works on GameTrack for that. If you want to ask the Ipsos team any questions, if you've put any in the chat already, then come back at 7:30 UK time, 2:30 Eastern time, 11:30 Pacific time for our live State of Games panel, where Ipsos will be on there to answer your questions. But do stay tuned because our next talk is on in just a few moments at 5:15 UK time, 12:15 Eastern time, 9:15 Pacific time, because we have Newzoo to give us some global games market data related to COVID-19 and the next gen consoles. Come back to live.gamesindustry.biz or onto our YouTube channel to watch that. See you in a few moments.